13 years. That is how long it took me to stop being angry about moving from Idaho, where I was accustomed to having 4 seasons, to California. It took another 10 years before I would truly come to appreciate what California has to offer her residents. Somehow, I doubt that it took Gottardo Piazzoni as long to discover what took me over a decade to learn. I can't say how it is that California is able to provide the best of what is in all of our states from Hawaii to Maine, but here she is in all of her casual decadence. It doesn't matter where you're from, you will find an element of your home here, even if you don't choose to call California home for good. She has a way of taking any culture, making it her own, and whispering back her interpretation so as to impart unique inspiration in any that will listen. Gottardo Piazzoni, a Swiss immigrant, listened. This is what California dreaming looked like through his eyes. Piazzoni was born in 1872 of Intronga, Switzerland, which is an Italian-speaking region. That, in and of itself, is not only interesting, but a perfect foundation to be nurtured by the naturally accepting California rhythm. The more complex, interesting, strange, and intriguing, the more this golden state seems to widen her embrace in acceptance. She is earthy in a glittering, expansive way that is slightly unique in comparison to other rugged and earthy states. It seems fitting that Piazzoni would immigrate with his family in 1887 to join his father on a dairy farm in Carmel Valley of California. Farm life is a perfect setting to commune with nature and animals, giving him a sense of there being more to life than what there appears to be on the surface. In fact, it is this quiet dispensing of knowledge that there are perhaps greater energies at work, inspiring and musing out our greatest talents, that would stay with Piazzoni through all of his formal classical training. By the time he had immigrated, he had already classically educated at Locarno Gymnasium. As much as Piazzoni had fallen in love with his environment, at a young age he made it known to his father that he had no intention of following in the family farming footsteps, and went on to study at the California School of Design from 1891 to 1894. With a strong grasp on landscape painting, he traveled to Paris in 1895 to study at the private Académie Julienne and the official École des Beaux-Arts. Fascinatingly, Piazzoni became proficient in sign language while rooming with fellow Californian and deaf painter Granville Redmond, with whom he remained lifelong friends. A little less than 10 years before the 1906 earthquake that would forever change San Francisco, Piazzoni returned to her shore to begin his career in earnest, painting, sculpting, founding the California Society of Etchers, and earning the highest acclaims both nationally and internationally for his work. It would be in 1906 that a leading Roman art critic would write, "Any of Piazzoni's pictures is the faithful expression of what he has observed not only with the eye of a draftsman or a colorist, but also with the feeling that has penetrated his soul. His pictures are chants. Poetry is the essential quality of his work, and it is poetry without ornament, free from all artificiality, simple, sincere, and totally spontaneous." I believe some of the most precious principles of what made Piazzoni both innovative for his time and as a California artist lie in the words of Holloway. For Piazzoni, his art was a mere expression of his journey to not only find a form of union with, but to find expression of God through his environment away from social and religious construct. This is the essence that most people find in their exploration of California. Perhaps it is because of the variety of indigenous tribes that have inhabited her boundaries, imbuing California with a sort of spiritual magic that causes personal awakening. Maybe it is simply because one can find everything from beaches, mountains, and tropics to the desert that causes such spiritual awe and wonder. I think, as many artists before me, that it is a culmination of all these things. So it was this culmination of California essence that inspired the Monterey Art Colony from 1875 to 1907. As a member of this niche group of artists, Piazzoni endeavored to find the best form of expression to marry his philosophical views with his artistic style. What better way to express one's innermost journey than through transcendentalism and tonalism? Like many artists of different fields, returning to the basic fundamentals of life became a movement. Bohemian secrets could be heard on the coastal breezes. Mysteries of the universe could be seen in the morning dewdrops of the valleys. California artists cozied up in thick blankets of fog as they looked introspectively for outward expression. Piazzoni was no exception. This specific movement could be seen in the architecture of the grandfather of California ranch style, William Worcester, who believed that less was more, except when it came to quality. Thus was born a simple, minimalistic style that permitted focus on an outdoor-indoor lifestyle, a primary characteristic of California living. This architecture, was not lost on Piazzoni. In fact, of all the fine arts artists of California at the time, he is the only one I have heard of that had such a strong belief in the interconnection of fine art and architecture. It is likely that his belief is part of what made his murals so successful. Morsberg wrote of Piazzoni, "He was perfectly suited to be a muralist because his philosophy was for the art to become part of the building, to be in harmony with the architecture, ideals that were held by the American Renaissance movement of the day." Probably Piazzoni's greatest mural was his last commission for the San Francisco Library. They were 5 paintings dedicated to the land and another 5 to the sea. He completed a smaller series by 1945, but it did not rival the original commission that was completed in 1932. Of his murals in general, it was said by Spencer Mackey, the dean of CSFA, "Piazzoni emerges calm and powerful, and I believe utterly triumphant. This art, emerging from the very heart of California itself, entirely free and independent of the rest of the world, is a tangible demonstration of the real art of California." Like the architecture that he was so fond of, a simple pared-down version that did not distract from what was important, his poetically personal maxim was simple. Nature is a revelation of God. Art is a revelation of man. This was a direct reflection of his chosen style, tonalism, which in and of itself is a pared-down version of many other styles. The colors are toned so that the focus is the subject and the symbolism of the piece. Not only is there no distraction from overt or saturated colors, but it is intentionally replaced by quiet, soothing, and contemplated versions of their original hue. In November of 1903, a Chronicle critic was quoted saying, "No pictures will be more talked of than those by G.F.P. Piazzoni. Some of them are in the lowest key in which it is possible to paint, and others are wonderfully luminous." Although tonalism is not the only style Piazzoni explored, it is a perfect artistic partner for the ideals, values, and beliefs of transcendentalism. This spiritual philosophy was coming into popularity and a reflection of religious backlash for the time. It was influencing everything from society, hence Yosemite being dubbed the New Eden, to fine arts, architecture, stage, and literature. I suppose if one considers the quiet, contemplative youth that Piazzoni enjoyed in Carmeli Valley on the farm, it is of no surprise that transcendentalism would appeal to him as an adult. Consider The Silent, a poem by Jones Very that distinguishes between the sounds that strike the ear and those that strike the soul when one walks in the woods. "'Tis all unheard, that silent voice, whose goings forth unknown to all, bids bending reed and bird rejoice, and fills with music nature's hall. And in the speechless human heart it speaks, where'er man's feet have trod, beyond the lips' deceitful art, to tell of him, the unseen God." Or consider Emerson's Nature, when he describes the transcendent moment. "In the woods, we return to reason and faith, There I feel that nothing can befall me in life, no disgrace, no calamity leaving me my eyes, which nature cannot repair, standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space. All mean egotism vanishes. I become transparent eyeball. I'm nothing. I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I'm part or parcel of God. How can we not see these very words in Piazzoni's work? The sea, the land, California, evening prayer, landscape with a cypress tree, or reflection. If the California-inspired spiritual awakening or contemplation is what Piazzoni was attempting to communicate through his art, I would say he was successful. How can we understand the symbolism embedded in brushstroke if we do not first understand the journey of the artist both physically and spiritually? We will have our own interpretations of an artist's expression, but first we must start with the artist. The artist first started with their environment. What inspired them? With this understanding, I have to agree with Piazzoni's simple response to what he considers to be his religion. He said, "I think it is California."